Hi, my name is Josh McGrath,
I'm Andrew Haas.
and this is the Ardent Pursuit Podcast. In our last episode, we discussed how to determine if you are ready for a relationship, and we gave you some homework to do. We wanted you to find a mentor, someone you could sit down with, and to go through the show notes and to go category by category and do a health check and to be open and to be honest. And I hope that all of you were able to do that because that is going to benefit you in so many great ways. Now, before we jump into today's topic, we actually want to revisit an idea from our last episode. And the concept is of a layaway wife or layaway girlfriend. The idea of a guy who wants to be in a relationship with a woman, but doesn't want to commit towards marriage, but just wants to secure her for his own because he's afraid that maybe some other great guy will come and start dating her. And the reason why we want to reference that again is because since our last episode, two articles have come out that really highlight this. The first one is from People magazine here, and here is the header. Greta Gerwig and Noah Baumbach are married after 12 years of dating. Like, wow. 12 years of dating.
Yeah.
I mean, I think we talked in the last episode, like or maybe it was 2 episodes ago, like if you get to like 12 months or 14 months or 16 months and you've not moved forward towards a marriage, like you need to get out.
Yes.
And here we're talking 12 years.
Right? Or how about the one from Vogue? Abby Champion and Patrick Schwarzenegger are engaged after 7 years of dating. Now, mind you, they're engaged after 7 years. This isn't married after 7 years.
So true. And it's Hollywood. So we know that the engagement process is going to be who knows how many years and kids later they'll finally get married. Like, women, do better. Stop committing to these type of men. Don't waste your life with a guy who isn't willing to commit to you. Like, look, oh my gosh, it's terrible. And you know what happens? Here's the thing. I know we got to get into today's episode, but part of the problem is, our culture, humanity, I think we tend to emulate and look towards, people who are famous and people in Hollywood, and we see what they do. And then, the media obviously turns it into a headline story. And we just begin to adopt the idea that what's being done culturally is what we should do.
Yeah, and this somehow became headline worthy. I have to think if this were, a century ago, these headlines probably would have seemed wildly out of place.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, absolutely crazy. Okay, so today's topic, we are covering who should be involved in your decision to begin a relationship. I love this topic. Now, before we dive in, I know in the last few episodes we've been talking about how we're going to get into the practical, aspects of how to initiate a romantic relationship. And Andrew, you and I were talking, and we discussed the idea that, initiating a romantic relationship is really actually fairly simple. It's as simple as sitting across from a woman saying, I want to date you. Do you want to date me? That's really all there is to it. However, what happens before and after that is much more complex.
Yes, a lot more. Yeah, there's the initiating process beforehand. There are practical steps you can take after the fact. They all got to be intentional. Beforehand, it's really important that you involve people and not just anybody, specifically counselors, mentors, even authority. And we'll unpack that in a little bit.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, because really, the steps that are taken before the moment of sitting across from a woman, they're many and varied.
Yeah.
And if she does say yes to wanting to date you, there are many steps after that.
Yes.
And so we want to set men up for success.
Yeah.
Again, we want to equip them to be initiators of romantic relationships that lead towards flourishing marriages.
And before you actually get to the point where you're talking to her, you want to know, I've done all the right things to the best of my ability up to this point.
Yes.
And you also want to know with a high level of confidence, I'm set up pretty well to walk out what comes next.
Yes.
Should things go well.
100%. That's actually a hugely important point. It is so funny that so often, culturally speaking, but I think men do this a lot. We don't want to actually set ourselves up for success relationally. Like, we want to set ourselves up for success financially. We want to set ourselves up for success when it comes to our career. We want to, for a lot of men at least, they want to set themselves up successfully when it comes to their physique and their personal health.
Yep.
But for whatever reason, when it comes to relationships, it's like, no, I got this. I don't need anyone to tell me how to do this. I'm a man. I got this. And maybe it's because in those other arenas, you can kind of, gung-ho it as a man and be semi-successful. But when it comes to relationships are complex. They're messy. You've got broken people involved. You need authority. You need outside counsel to help you in that. And one of the best ways to set up success for a future flourishing marriage is to start out in a way where you are determining with counselors and authority whether that's even something you should be pursuing in that season.
And I would even argue that, there's something inherent to men that want to figure it out and problem solve and, get to a solution. And that's great. We should do that. There should be many areas of our lives where we can, just put in the time, the grit, figure it out, trial and error. But when it comes to relationships, starting here, this is not one of those places.
No.
And there will be other places later on, within marriage, with kids. Doing it on your own is not the way to go.
Yep.
But it starts here.
Yeah.
And so men need to have the self-awareness to know, when can I put in my effort and my skills and figure this out on my own? And when do I need to bring in people around me, because there's probably a lot here that I'm missing.
And this is a conversation that will make probably the majority of our listeners uncomfortable, because men don't want to be told they can't do it on their own.
Yeah.
That goes against our very nature. It's that classic, like back in high school, like, bet you can't do 10 pull-ups, bet you can't pick up that rock, bet you can't lift this. And what do? Like, as a guy, you're just like, no, I'm gonna go do it. I'm gonna make that happen. And there's just something about like the masculine drive that wants to prove himself.
Yeah, and there's something good toward being competent. Men should work toward being competent.
100%.
And that's having a certain skill set or having an ability. And with competence, it means you can do it on your own.
Yep.
Sometimes,
Yes.
or oftentimes. But men also need to recognize where that doesn't apply.
Yes, it's true. And we are going to break down this concept of what does it look like to determine, how do you determine, whether you should be in a relationship? Well, we're getting to part 2 really, which is, well, who should be involved in that decision?
Yeah.
And because like maybe, our last episode, it was kind of like a self-evaluation. How am I doing all these areas? Do I check them all off? Am I doing fairly well? Good. Is there, what do we say, that movement towards health in those areas? As long as there's movement towards health. Okay, good.
Yeah.
Now the next step is saying, all right, who needs to be involved in that decision?
Right.
To determine whether I should be in a relationship. And I love this because this is something that I know we're both very passionate about, and we've walked with men before through this. So let's break down the concept of authority versus counselors.
Yeah.
Because they're different.
A little bit of overlap, but they're different.
And men need both.
Yep. Gotta have
Thoughts?
both. Well, authority is going to be someone who knows you, who lives life with you, is probably older than you, not always, but probably, and is going to be wiser than you.
Yes.
At least in the area that you're giving them authority. And that's going to mean when someone has authority in your life, you're not looking to them for permission to live life. This isn't like, I can't do this until I check in with so-and-so.
Yep.
No, you need to give explicit permission to somebody older and wiser than you, the ability to come to you and say, hey, knock it off.
Yes.
Or, hey, stop doing that.
Yes.
And you'll actually stop doing it. On the flip side, they can come to you and say, you're not doing these things. You need to be doing these things. And you won't just be like, oh, okay, that's a good idea. You'll actually do it. They just have that ability. You've given them that place to do that. Or conversely, they can come to you and say, hey, you're not doing this. you need to be doing this.
Yes.
Start doing this.
Yep.
And you start doing it.
Yeah.
It's not like, oh, okay, hey, thanks for the input, I'll consider it. No, they have that place of authority where you trust their judgment. And if they tell you to do something, it's because they're seeing something that you don't see. And they have life experience and wisdom that you don't have, which is compelling them to say what they're saying. And you take it seriously enough to actually act on it.
100%. Now, when it comes to, parents and pastors being an authority in a man's life, one of the things that is important to understand is that once you're 18, legally, your parents aren't any type of an authority in your life, just kind of legally, secularly speaking. And pastors obviously never had any type of authority in your life.
Yep.
But the authority that parents and or pastors may have in your life is because you've invited them to have a seat of authority in your life. It's not a place in your life that they assume automatically. It's not a default position they have.
Yes, even if you think they do, because sometimes you think, oh, my parents, they're my authority. In some ways they are. You might have a pastor, you might have a coach, you might have somebody who's an authority figure.
Yep.
And you might assume, oh, they'll come and tell me if something's off. But no, that's not the default position. The default position should be you going to them saying, hey, you have a place to speak into my life.
Yes.
At any point.
And that's an uncomfortable conversation to have as a man. Because again, men do not want to put themselves in a place of submission. They want to say, I've got this. Other people need to submit to me. My wife needs to submit to me. My kids need to submit to me. My employees need to submit to me. Those under my authority need to submit to me. But any godly man recognizes that he first has to start by being under submission, being under authority.
Yep.
And authority I think today, we're just going to define it very simply. This is not exclusive. But it's just a way that I think is simple to begin with, our parents and pastors.
And just to be clear, we're talking about authority that you give to somebody.
Yes.
This isn't authority that someone just imposes on you.
That's true, yep.
You are explicitly giving them something.
Because parents don't, once you're 18, legally, they have no authority over you.
Right.
And pastors never had any type of authority over you. So when you're a man, we're talking to men 18 and older here, but as a man, you have to go to your parents, you have to go to your pastor, and you have to initiate a conversation where you say, hey, I want to invite you into a place in my life. We're talking about relationships today, but I would argue it needs to be open up your whole life. And if you see something in my life that needs to be changed or something I need to start doing, I've used this term before, you have carte blanche authority to come speak to me about anything. I've said that to my pastor multiple times, where I've said, it doesn't matter what it is.
Yeah.
I don't care how annoyed or angry or frustrated or offended I am that you brought it to my attention. You have carte blanche authority to speak into my life about anything. And then that way, you have willingly put an authority over you, a covering over you, and you have identified who they are, and to them have said, I'm going to place myself under your authority. And that's really, we see that example in Jesus. Why do we encourage men to be under authority? Why do we encourage men to be submitted? Well, we're coming at this from a Christian worldview, and we're victims of our theology. And so we believe that men need to be under authority, just as Christ himself was. And we actually see a couple great examples of this. Matthew 28:18, right? I'm coming up to the Great Commission here. But Jesus says here that all authority has been given to me in heaven and on earth. Well, where did that authority come from? Well, it was given to him by God the Father. And then a very famous verse, Luke 22:42, says Jesus in the garden praying before his crucifixion. He says, Father, if it is your will, take this cup away from me. Nevertheless, not my will, but yours be done. We see Jesus living out what it looks like to be under authority. If God the Father says, go to the cross, do X, he's going to do X. And he's praying and appealing, well, please, maybe is there a different way to go? But it doesn't matter if that way happens or not, because whatever God the Father says, I'm submitted, I'm a man under authority, I'm going to do this. And Jesus himself exemplifies perfectly biblical masculinity, biblical manhood. And what do we see in Jesus? a man who is submitted under authority. And so if, as men, we are called to that, and there is nothing more alarming and dangerous than a man who is not under authority.
Yeah.
He's a wild gun. He is ready to go rogue at any moment. And the path of destruction that he leaves is often the lives of people.
Yeah. Yep. And the women he pursues.
Yes. Yeah. Women, thank you for listening. If you are today, don't be in a relationship with a man who refuses to be under authority or who has no authority in his life. You want to be in a relationship with a man who understands the value and importance of being submitted to authority and can identify that in his life. Authority whom you can go to and say, hey, Josh, Bill, Bob, whatever, says you're his authority. Is that true? And for that authority to not be like, oh, I don't know. But for that authority to say, yes, I know, because we've had that conversation. That is going to set you up for success. That's going to set a potential future marriage up for success. It's going to set a potential future family up for success. That is so important.
Yeah.
Now, one of the things that is important to understand is that, while authority will always have more wisdom than you and will likely be older than you, not always the case, but likely be, there is another very important biblical precedent that we find in, Proverbs 11:14. That says there is safety in a multitude of counselors. You had touched on that earlier.
Yeah, and we should just clarify too about the authority thing for, someone younger listening. Authority in your life is going to be someone older.
Yes. If you're under 30, oh my gosh, your authority better be older than you.
Yeah. Don't make an exception and think that your friend or
the Papa John's delivery guy.
Yes.
He
might be a few years older and
not your authority.
No. That's not how it works.
Yes.
Now, counselors, friends, mentors, also a very important role. Slightly different.
Yes.
But highly, highly important for a guy to have many counselors. Unlike authority, you don't just want one counselor. You want to get opinions and input from many people who are who have experience. Who have thoughts, opinions, who know you, who live life with you. That's what you're looking for with counselors.
Again, Proverbs talks about having a multitude of counselors. So it's definitely more than one. Depending upon personality, background, situation, you might find that you've got 3 to 5. You might find you have more than that. The goal is not to try to get every single person to be a counselor. That's going to be unhelpful. The goal is to identify people, like you said, who you live life with, who know you well, who are solid in the faith, who have lived experience, and invite them in to be counselors as you're making important life decisions. I think about the fact that, I have different people in my life depending upon important decisions I'm making. If I'm going to buy a car, there are like my car guys I go to and ask for counsel and wisdom and want to know about should I be spending this much money? Is this a good deal? I have financial counselors. I mean, you're one of those where when it comes to investments and things like that, I'm like, I want to seek out the wisdom and experience they have. And then I have relationship counselors, which, is my biggest pool of people who I turn to if and when I want to pursue a relationship. And so the idea is maybe one person or 2 people or 5 people aren't going to wear all the hats, so to speak.
Right.
But it is important to note that you want to have people in your life who have wisdom and experience and who know you well and who live with you. Don't pick your childhood best friend who you haven't seen in 20 years.
Exactly. And the interesting thing about wisdom from a group of people is that it often shows itself through a common denominator, especially and critically important in this topic of pursuing somebody.
Yeah.
If you go to 5 or 10 people, you could pose the same question and you'll get 5 or 10 different answers, likely. But in the majority of them, if these are people that are well selected, there will be a common theme to the advice given. And that's really what you're going for. You're not going for any one specific input or opinion, but you're trying to gain wisdom and insight into like the overall picture. Is this a good idea?
Yes.
And that really comes through clearly the more people you ask.
You know, it's funny because we've walked with obviously many guys over the years who have, you know, initiated relationships with women. And I remember sitting down across from guys and being like, you know, they're letting me know that they're starting this relationship, that they're dating this girl, and they're really excited and they want to tell me the news. And so my question almost always is, well, who did you invite into that process? And you know, nothing drives me nuts more than a guy who's like, oh, you know, I prayed about it and the Holy Spirit just gave me peace, you know, did my essential oils, you know, just rub some crystals together and it's just me and Jesus and I got so much peace. And I'm like, okay, like if the thing you have here is only you and Jesus and your peace, I don't trust that at all. Sorry, no, nada. I've listened to men tell me that they need to divorce their wife because they've got peace, that they got to marry some girl in line. So I'm like, no. What I'm looking for is the way God is going to work. Yes, he will give you peace. Yes, God will speak to you directly. But the way that God is going to confirm and oftentimes lead you is through the voices of others, particularly authority, and then also counselors. And so for men, it is so important that before they start a relationship, before they even begin that process of sitting down across from a woman and saying, hey, I'm interested in you, is to actually go to their community and to their counselors and to their authority and say, hey, this is something I'm interested in. Because what it does is it sets them up for success. It sets the relationship up for success. It sets potentially marriage up for success. And I've never, ever heard of a couple who eventually got married who walked through this process saying, you know what I'm really annoyed with? You know what would have made our marriage so much better? Is if we had just never talked to anybody about wanting to pursue each other. You know what would have been very beneficial is if we had just done this in a silo where no outside counsel or wisdom or authority was given to us. And I'm like, you know, I'm foreshadowing an episode coming up titled Don't Be an Idiot. Can't wait for that one. But what happens so often is because you got men who are just stupid and they're selfish and they're idiots and they think they can do it all on their own because they're a man. They won't seek authority. They won't submit to authority. They won't seek counsel or wisdom. They'll just go ahead, begin a relationship because I've got this. They don't. And then suddenly they're years into this relationship and if they're dating, it starts to fall apart and it gets messy, or they get married and 6 months, a year, 5 years, 10 years down the road, it's a complete mess. And they're like, oh my gosh, like, I just can't believe this happened.
Yeah.
And I'm like, why? I can believe this happened.
Yeah.
You know, I famously have said for years, I don't know what will work when it comes to relationships, but I know what won't work.
Yeah.
And a man not under authority, a man who does not have counselors around him, that won't work.
Because here's something really important to remember. Men on their own can't discern reality. They can't discern reality about themselves.
Yes.
About God. You need others around you. We have blind spots, we have our biases, we have our own take, our own view, and there's just things we miss. And we just can't fully discern our reality on our own.
Yes.
Try as hard as we might.
Yes. And so this idea of like surrounding yourself by counselors, it is uncomfortable for men to do. It goes against the grain, it goes against the culture. But it is highly important because here's the reality. A man who's submitted to authority, a man who has counselors all around him, is a man that any godly woman would be interested in. A godly woman is not looking for a rogue man who says, I can do this all on my own.
Exactly.
And so, like, if you want to attract the right woman as a man, get under authority. Surround yourself by counselors. And that will set you up for success. That will set a future relationship up for success. That will set a future marriage up for success. Because it's interesting, so many people, I think this is probably true for both the Christian world and the non-Christian world, just assume that because, you know, they live life with people, you know, friends, family, that if they start to go off the rails, if they start to not do well, that people will just reach out to them and check in on them and hold them accountable, etc. When in reality, that's rarely the case unless you're intentionally inviting in those outside voices to bring correction.
You've got to invite them in.
You have to.
Have to.
And we hate that. I think about, back when I was in college, there was a girl that, we had classes together. I was her accompanist. We were in a trio together, music school. And it started off as friends, and then we became like super close friends. And then like a year later, I was like, I want to marry you. And I never actually talked to anybody about that process. I didn't invite in any authority or any counselors into that process. And I justified it by saying, oh, we're not really dating. I never used the term dating when we were together. I was just like, we're like super close friends. And I'm like, bro, if you're spending 6 days a week together, you're not super close friends. You're dating. Bro, you want to marry her. You're dating. And so, idiot 21-year-old Josh, was like, oh, I got this. And in the end, it actually fell apart, and it was my first and only breakup. And it was like, at the time I was like, this is terrible. This is awful. I'm depressed. Why even go on living? Blah, 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 blah. Woe is me. And, looking back, I'm like, yeah, you're such an idiot, Josh.
Yeah.
And the reason why you ended up in that mess, I can tell you exactly why you ended up in that mess. You invited no outside counselors. You had no authority involved in that process.
People would have said something.
They would have said something. Heck, I would say something. I'd go back and yell at me right now. I want to yell at me right now. But it's like that tends to be so often the default of men is just to say, I've got this. I'm going to make this work.
Yeah. I have my own share of heartbreak and screw ups. Same thing. Dating and not bringing people in. There's a girl I was interested in. I didn't want anyone to tell me if I should or shouldn't be pursuing her. I just thought I should be because we were on the same page in a lot of things.
Yeah.
So that was all I needed. And so decided to pursue her. Things were going great, as they often do when you first start out, and then didn't take long before things weren't so great. And instead of trying to find people that could maybe give some input, I tried to handle the breakup myself. That was also terrible. And it was, she was worse off for it. I was worse off for it. Wasn't fair to her. You can even contrast that to someone else later on that I was interested in. I actually went to her dad first.
Awesome.
I thought I might try something different this time. Just let him know what I was thinking, and he said, hey, go talk to her and see what she thinks. So I did, and much to my dismay, she was like, I'd rather stay friends.
Her loss.
It is her loss.
Come on.
And so, as sad as I was like, hey, cool, let's, we can stay friends, and we did, and we're still friends. But it was, fine.
Yeah. The outcome, again, we talked about setting yourself up for success. The outcome, the consequence, the good consequence, is that when you surround yourself by authority and community, you're better off. People around you are better off. The woman is better off. And what's important to note here is this. When we're talking about being under authority, when we're talking about having counselors, we're actually not just talking to single men who want to, be in a romantic relationship or one day be married. This goes across the board for any man, regardless of season of life or marital status. And I don't care if you're 15, 25, 35, 45, 55, 75. I have no patience for any man, particularly a Christian man, who is not submitted to authority, but just lives their life and it's just them and Jesus. They're going to be the arbiters of how they live that out. What pisses me off even more are men who do that and then demand that other people submit to them, that their wives submit to them, that their kids submit to them, that their employees submit to them. Meanwhile, they themselves refuse to be under authority. I mean, those type of men are just idiots. And what they're going to leave is a wake of broken relationships and brokenness.
Yep.
And so you want to set yourself up for success as a man, either as a single man, as a married man, as a father, as a business leader. I don't care what role you have in life. You want to set yourself up for success. Be a man under authority. Be a man who's surrounded by counselors.
Yeah.
Don't be a man who assumes you can do it all. I don't care how much testosterone you have. You can't do it all. You can't discern reality well. You will fail.
Yeah.
And the only way to succeed is to be surrounded by counselors and to be under authority.
Yep. The idea of having counselors and authority is going to make call it a breakup, for lack of a better term. Sure. Say you are interested in somebody, pursuing somebody, but then you decide to end things, go your separate ways. It's going to there's a much higher chance of that going well if there are other people. If you try to do that alone, there's a very low chance that you end a relationship with somebody and things socially or relationally with them are still good.
Yep, it's true. And one of the benefits of going to your community and authority to get counsel before you decide to initiate a relationship is they're not finding out about it online. They're not like, people aren't coming to them in the community and through the grapevine and be like, hey, did you hear that? Is Josh in a relationship? Is he and Betsy over there? Are they an item? And the counselors and authorities not like caught off guard and be like, I don't know. And suddenly like authority is like tracking you down to be like, hey, what's going on here? And your counselors, who are probably mostly going to be friends and mentors, aren't going to be like, so I heard. There's clarity up front. And just as a side note, this is just free advice for the entire world. Your relationship shouldn't be posted about online anyways. That's just good advice to live by. That will bless you. That will bless whatever woman you're dating. That will bless whatever woman you marry. You should not be posting about anything until maybe engagement. I'll say engagement.
You get that one for free.
You get that one for free, and then you're done until the wedding. You get to post wedding photos, and then you're done, and we don't want to see any honeymoon photos. Just stop it. Nobody wants to see where you and your lover are going to. Gross. Poo. Dislike. But anyways, that's so important to have those counselors in your life beforehand, because then everybody, the community, is really on board together.
Yeah.
And that is a countercultural idea, because relationships are so exclusive and are so tunnel visioned. It's
they are.
Me and you, and that is it.
Yep.
We're starstruck, love struck, it's just me and her, and all that matters is her. The only person I talk to is her. The only person I text is her. The only person I emails her. The only person on Instagram I spend all my time liking is her. I'm like, no. You're called to live life in community.
There will be moments in marriage where, yes, you are giving all your attention to the other person.
Of course.
But that is not life.
That is not life.
And so, yes, starting out on that premise, this person, my focus is on them. That's, yeah.
Oh man,
starting out in the wrong.
I can't. We got. I mean, that's many episodes down the road where we're gonna start talking about walking out a relationship. Oh, it's gonna be good. All right, so homework this week, guys. Here's what we want you to do. You need to make sure you've got counselors and authority in your life. If you don't have that, you need to put a pause on either a desire for a romantic relationship, or if you're in a romantic relationship, you need to put pause on that, and you need to go find yourself authority. We are going to recommend pastors and parents, and you use wisdom on deciding how you're going to incorporate them into your life. And counselors, you need a multitude of counselors. Start with at least 3 to 5. Not everyone needs, whatever, I have 26.
No, can't hurt. But...
Can't hurt. That's probably too many for most people. So start with that 3 to 5 range. Get some counselors in your life, because this will protect you and aid you in the pursuit of any type of romantic relationship that will ultimately equip you towards a flourishing marriage. Also, we've completed 5 episodes now so far. I'm sure there are questions that many of you have, and we love to hear from you on those, and to even take some time and actually respond to and answer some of them.
Yeah.
So you can reach out to us by sending an email to contact@ardentpursuit.fm, or you can drop us a message on any of our social media channels. We'll get that, and in the future, we'll begin doing episodes where we'll just talk about some of the questions.
Yeah.
And answer those.
That'll be
great having you guys here today. We will see you here next time for episode 7.